Hello everyone! Tonight we dive into one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries in American history. Imagine an entire colony of men, women, and children who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of their existence and a single carved word as a clue. This is the haunting story of the lost colony of Roanoke, a place that has baffled historians, archaeologists, and storytellers for more than 4 centuries. The story begins in the late 16th century, during a time when England was eager to expand its influence and challenge Spain's dominance in the New World. Queen Elizabeth I, ambitious and determined, sought to establish a permanent English presence across the Atlantic. It was Sir Walter Raleigh, a favorite of the Queen, who took on the task of organizing expeditions to the mysterious land known as Virginia, named in honor of the Virgin Queen herself. Raleigh never set foot on Roanoke, but his name would forever be tied to its fate. In 1584, Raleigh secured a royal charter granting him permission to explore and colonize the new lands. 2 ships were sent on the first voyage to scout locations along the coast of what we now call North Carolina. They returned with glowing reports of fertile lands, abundant wildlife, and friendly native tribes. England was excited by the promise of opportunity and wealth. The dream of a colony across the sea began to take root. The first attempt to colonize Roanoke began in 1585, when Raleigh sent a group of around 100 men under the command of Sir Richard Grenville. They built a small settlement on Roanoke Island, but things quickly went wrong. Relations with the local Native Americans soured after disputes over food and resources. Supplies ran low, and morale weakened. When Sir Francis Drake arrived in 1586, after a raid on the Caribbean, he offered to take the starving colonists back to England. Most accepted the offer, abandoning the settlement, but Raleigh was not ready to give up. In 1587, a second and more ambitious expedition was launched. This time, families joined the mission, signaling a true attempt at permanent settlement. Over 100 men, women, and children set sail under the leadership of John White, a talented artist and mapmaker who had already visited the New World. Among the settlers was White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, who was pregnant with her first child. When the colonists arrived at Roanoke, they faced challenges from the start. Instead of settling where they had planned, they discovered that the previous site had been left in ruins, and the atmosphere was tense with local tribes who remembered the conflicts with the first group of settlers. Still, the colony tried to make a life on the island. They built houses, attempted farming, and sought to establish peaceful relations with neighboring tribes, though trust was difficult to maintain. That summer, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. Her birth was celebrated as a symbol of hope, a sign that England had truly planted its seed in America. Yet the joy was overshadowed by the colony's desperate need for supplies. John White, as governor, decided he would return to England to gather provisions, promising his people that he would come back swiftly to relieve their struggles. But fate intervened. When White reached England, war with Spain was raging. The threat of the Spanish Armada consumed England's resources and attention, and all ships were needed for defense. White found it impossible to secure a vessel to return to his colony. What he thought would be a quick journey stretched into years of waiting. It was not until 1590, 3 long years later, that John White finally returned to Roanoke. As his ship approached the familiar shores, anticipation gave way to dread. The settlement he had left was eerily silent. Houses stood abandoned, weathered by storms. Wildlife had begun to reclaim the area. The colonists were gone, every man, woman, and child. There were no bodies, no signs of a massacre, no evidence of a hurried departure. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatoan. Another carving, simply Crow, was found on a tree nearby. White took this as a sign that the settlers had moved to Croatoan Island, home of a friendly tribe that had once helped them. But storms and dwindling supplies prevented White from searching further. He never saw the colonists again. The mystery of Roanoke was born. Theories about what happened to the colonists have haunted historians for centuries. Some believe the settlers integrated with local Native American tribes, blending into their communities. Reports from later settlers in the region told of fair-skinned English, speaking natives with gray eyes, a tantalizing suggestion that the colonists had survived through assimilation. Others suggest a darker fate. Hostile tribes may have attacked, leaving no survivors. But if this were true, where were the remains? Why was there no evidence of violence left behind? The eerie absence of bodies fueled suspicions that something far stranger had occurred. Still others speculated that the colonists tried to sail back to England themselves, constructing crude boats and setting out into the vast Atlantic. If so, their attempt would almost certainly have ended in disaster. The ocean is unforgiving, and no records of such survivors ever reached England. For centuries, archaeologists and treasure hunters scoured Roanoke Island and nearby lands in search of answers. They found tools, pottery, and artifacts, but no definitive proof of what happened to the settlers. Each clue raised more questions than it answered. Legends grew around Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. Some tales claim she grew up among native tribes, her life blending into myth and folklore. Stories told of a white doe, a ghostly deer said to roam the woods of Roanoke, believed by some to be Virginia, transformed by native magic. This blend of history and legend only deepened the mystery, making Roanoke not just a puzzle of history, but also a story of haunting folklore. The word Croatoan itself has taken on a chilling aura in American lore. Over time, it appeared in other strange contexts. Centuries after Roanoke, the same word was reportedly found scrawled in places linked to mysterious disappearances and deaths. It became more than a clue. It became a symbol of the unknown, a word of dread, echoing through history like a curse. John White never gave up hope of finding his family. He wrote in sorrow about his daughter Eleanor and granddaughter Virginia, wondering if they had survived. But his efforts were in vain. He died in England without ever knowing the fate of the colonists he had left behind. His story is a tragic one, a tale of duty, regret, and the haunting unknown. The lost colony of Roanoke became America's oldest mystery. It remains unsolved to this day, a question mark at the dawn of English settlement in the New World. What happened to over 100 souls who vanished without leaving a trace? Were they absorbed into native tribes, destroyed by enemies, or swept away by the unforgiving sea? Or was there something more, something beyond explanation, something that left only the word Croatoan carved into wood like a warning, like a whisper from the void? This mystery would continue to grow through the centuries, as explorers, writers, and dreamers tried to piece together the fragments of the past. Each generation added new theories, new legends, and new chills to the story of Roanoke. And even now, over 400 years later, the silence of the lost colony still speaks. The mystery of Roanoke did not fade with time. Instead, it grew, gathering layers of myth, speculation, and eerie coincidences that have made it one of the most enduring puzzles in American history. While John White's sorrowful return left questions unanswered, later generations would return again and again to the island, searching for traces of the missing colonists. What they found were tantalizing fragments, but never the whole truth. In the early 1600s, just decades after the disappearance, new English settlers established Jamestown in Virginia. These colonists occasionally reported encounters with Native Americans who had European features or spoke words resembling English. Some claimed that tribes spoke of a people who had once lived among them, white men, women, and children who had joined their communities. Could these accounts have been echoes of the Roanoke colonists? The possibility lured adventurers and chroniclers, but no one could provide solid proof. Captain John Smith, one of the leaders of Jamestown, wrote of stories told by natives of people clothed at a place called Occonahonen, which some believed to be descendants of the Roanoke settlers. He tried to investigate, but political turmoil and constant survival struggles at Jamestown distracted from the search. Still, the whispers persisted. There were survivors somewhere beyond the wilderness. Centuries later, archaeologists and historians dug deeper into these claims. Evidence of European goods such as metal tools, beads, and weapons turned up in Native American sites along the Carolina coast. These items may have been obtained through trade, but some scholars argued they hinted at something more, that English settlers had indeed lived among the tribes, teaching and sharing their knowledge. If true, then Roanoke's people may not have died but rather transformed, absorbed into a new culture, leaving behind their English identity for survival. Yet even as hopeful theories emerged, darker ones refused to fade. Some believed the colonists met with violence. Certain tribes in the area were hostile, resentful of the intrusion on their lands. A conflict could have wiped out the settlers, their bodies buried or lost in the wilderness. The absence of remains, however, keeps this theory in shadow. Could an entire community have vanished without leaving a trace of bones, graves, or ruins? Another theory suggests starvation and desperation led the colonists to scatter, breaking apart and seeking refuge wherever they could. Disease may have played a role, sweeping through the vulnerable community, leaving few survivors. The harsh climate, hurricanes, and lack of supplies could have been just as deadly as any sword. In this sense, Roanoke may have simply collapsed under the weight of misfortune, the settlers fading away into the merciless embrace of the land. But perhaps the most unsettling theory of all involves the supernatural. Over the centuries, folklore has wrapped Roanoke in a shroud of otherworldly dread. Some say the colonists were taken, spirited away by forces beyond human understanding. The carving of the word Croatoan has been interpreted not just as a clue, but as a mark of something sinister. The word itself has taken on a haunted life, appearing in strange places linked to disappearances and death. In the 19th century, the American writer Edgar Allan Poe is said to have whispered the word Croatoan on his deathbed, though no one knew why. The infamous stage magician Harry Houdini, obsessed with the mysteries of the afterlife, reportedly had the word scrawled in his diary shortly before his death. In 1937, the pilot Amelia Earhart vanished during her attempt to circumnavigate the globe, and the word Croatoan was allegedly found carved into a post of her abandoned campsite. Even in 1970, when horror writer Ambrose Bierce disappeared in Mexico without explanation, his bed was said to bear the single word Croatoan. Whether these tales are fact or folklore, they have fused the mystery of Roanoke with a chilling, almost cursed legacy. In the 20th and 21st centuries, technology brought new hope for solving the mystery. Archaeologists used advanced tools, ground-penetrating radar, and DNA analysis to examine Roanoke and surrounding areas. One of the most important clues was found not on the island itself, but on the mainland at a site called Hatteras. There, artifacts linked to the settlers, including items of English origin, were discovered. Could this be evidence that some of the colonists had indeed moved to Croatoan Island and beyond? The Dare stones added another layer of intrigue. Beginning in the 1930s, a series of engraved stones were claimed to have been found in North Carolina, supposedly carved by Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter. These stones told a tragic story, that many of the colonists had died from war and disease, and that only a handful survived, moving inland. Though some scholars dismiss the stones as forgeries, others believe at least one may be genuine. If true, they would provide heartbreaking confirmation of the settlers' fate. And then there are the legends of Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. In some stories, she grew into a beautiful young woman who was captured by tribes and transformed into a ghostly white doe. The white doe legend became a symbol of innocence lost and the blending of two worlds, the English settlers and the native tribes. In poetry and song, Virginia became more than a historical figure. She became a spirit of mystery, forever tied to the haunting of Roanoke. The Roanoke mystery has also become a mirror for American imagination. Each generation has reinterpreted it according to its fears and fascinations. For early settlers, it was a warning of the dangers of the New World. For later historians, it was a puzzle of survival and adaptation. For modern storytellers, it is a canvas for tales of curses, supernatural vanishings, and ghostly revenge. Popular culture has kept the legend alive. From novels to television shows, the word Roanoke has become shorthand for the unknown, the inexplicable, the terrifying. Some stories claim the colony was taken by witches, others that it was swallowed by the land itself, still others that it slipped into another dimension, forever out of reach. The truth may never be known, but the possibilities keep the mystery alive. Even today, scientists and archaeologists continue their search. Excavations in the Carolinas have uncovered new artifacts, fragments of ceramics, tools, and weapons that suggest the settlers may have split into groups, some joining friendly tribes, others perishing. Each discovery brings us closer to an answer, but the silence of the lost colony still resists closure. What is certain is that the disappearance of Roanoke left a deep scar on history. It was a failure for England, a mystery for the world, and a tragedy for the families who vanished. For John White, it was the loss of his daughter and granddaughter, a wound he carried to his grave. For the colonists, it was the end of their hopes for a new life, swallowed by the unknown. And for us, it is a story that continues to echo across time. Every whisper of wind through the pines of Roanoke, every crash of waves on its shores, seems to carry the unanswered question: what happened to the lost colony? Were they survivors, absorbed into new lives among the natives? Were they victims, cut down by disease, hunger, or violence? Or did they vanish into something far stranger, something that left behind only a single word as a message to the ages? Perhaps the greatest power of the Roanoke mystery is that it has no ending. It remains open, eternal, a riddle without solution. And in that way, the colonists achieved a kind of immortality, not in the life they hoped to build, but in the legend they left behind. When night falls over the island and the forest grows quiet, some say you can still hear faint voices, as if carried by the sea breeze, the voices of the lost colonists calling out across time. And somewhere, etched in memory like it was once carved in wood, the word remains: Croatoan.